Hello again, everyone. Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. I've got a panel today that wishes to discuss with everybody out there recent changes to Iowa's law. We have effective July 1st, some pretty exciting things to talk about, but we want to make sure that everybody understands those well. So joining me today down here in the corner, I think you guys see it the same way I do, Senator Jason Schultz. Hello again.
Good morning. Hello.
We've got Scott Jones from NRA-ILA.
Morning.
And Richard Rogers, a fellow board member of mine and our chief lobbyist at IFC. Okay, so let's kick things off. Let's get right into this. So July 1, Iowa Code changes, and you were instrumental in this, Senator Schultz. Tell us about what we can expect here. What's going on?
Well, come July 1st, traditionally the date that new laws passed by the legislature take effect, Iowa will become in reality a constitutional carry state. So it's important that we deal with the new freedoms, the new responsibilities, and how we handled that. So coming up July 1st, the relationship between your state government and the citizen is going to be flipped 180 degrees. America, from the beginning, the great experiment, the point was that the citizen was a free individual and could conduct themselves as they saw fit until they infringed on the rights of others. That meant, it's protected, not given, but protected and stated in the Second Amendment that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So from there, I'll move forward to what Iowa did about 100 years ago. They decided that if you're going to bear arms, you're going to need permission, or we're not going to allow you. And in fact, in the beginning, they weren't going to allow you. So we've been working our way, building freedom, firearm freedom for Iowa citizens for decades, actually. And we've made some large strides. Certainly couldn't have all been done without the help of Iowa Firearms Coalition and your members. But we've gone from may issue to shall issue. We've just kind of kept moving the ball. This year, we went ahead and said that if you can legally purchase and own a firearm, that you can also carry, that you can bear that firearm without permission from the state in the form of a concealed weapon permit or in violation of any open carry laws. So come July 1st, you're a free citizen when it comes to a firearm. If you can buy it and own it by federal law, and which state law matches that, you can carry that. You can bear arms.
I love it. Thank you, by the way. And thank you to every House rep, every senator, and our governor, or excuse me, House rep and senator that voted for it. Thank you very much. And thank you to the governor for signing it. This is fantastic. So we've covered the thanks and we've covered what this is. Let's chip away at a few questions that most people will probably have. So this takes effect July 1st. And it's often referred to as constitutionally or permitless carry. So now, granted, this is not meant to be construed in any way as legal advice, and it's very wise of everybody here that we all four agree to this, and this is just smart. But there are best practices that are wise to consider. So, what might that look like when you're going to carry on a constitutional basis, or better yet, as Richard put it, where you're going to lawfully carry? So, walk us through those two different options we have with permit and permitless.
The old system, which we actually left in place, the old permit system, the same way to get a permit, the length of permit, the fee, all of that is still in place. And I'm actually one who has a carry permit now. I'm going to continue to have a carry permit. And the reasons that you would want to do that are, first of all, the permit works as an instant background check. You've had your background. If I'm going to go to a gun shop, instead of him calling the FBI and going through the National Instant Criminal Background Search, I can show my permit to carry and instantly have that requirement satisfied. Also, private sales. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But for private sales, I think one of the best practices that just gun guys and gals have taken up is, I don't know you, you'd like to buy my weapon, I need you to have a permit to carry, which shows that there was a government background check done. That's not a legal requirement, but it is a best practice, meaning that I did my due diligence to make sure that this person is a law-abiding citizen and can be expected to lawfully use that firearm. So that my permit works in that way, both for commercial sales, private sales. It also allows me to leave the state. Over here in Western Iowa, I go to South Dakota or Nebraska most frequently. shortly here this summer, I'm going to head out to Utah with my family, go out into the mountains and just look at God's beauty. And I'm going to be able to bear arms across state lines because they recognize my concealed weapon permit.
Yeah, there you go.
Some states, and this isn't legal advice, some states will recognize your right to keep and bear arms as an out-of-state U.S. citizen. Not all of them will. Having that concealed carry permit from Iowa ups your chances that the state recognizes your God-given right to keep and bear arms. That is all for the individual citizen to research themselves, as they go from state to state. But so we left the old permit system, both permit to carry weapons and permit to acquire pistols and revolvers in place. So there's no change there. If you're comfortable with that system, continue doing it, and you'll really see no additional gain there. However, if you are a citizen who either never wanted to have a concealed carry permit to lawfully carry, or suddenly find yourself in a situation where you do need a pistol, a revolver, a long arm, we have removed the necessity of having a permit to acquire pistols or revolvers or a concealed carry permit if you are in the state. And the point of this is, first of all, to change that relationship between government and citizen. You shouldn't have to ask permission to keep and bear arms. So we set that up front first. But if you are a Iowa citizen who suddenly finds yourself in need of protection or the ability to protect yourself, if you need a handgun, let's say you're a single head of household, suddenly find yourself the victim or the target of a stalker or an ex who wants to do damage to you, you shouldn't have to go to the county sheriff, file the paperwork, wait for the background check to come back. They call you, say it's done, you go get it, then you go to a gun shop or even realize borrow a weapon from a friend or a relative. Under the old system, you couldn't go to your brother and sister and say, hey, I'm scared that somebody's about to hurt me. I need to borrow a handgun. It was illegal. Now it's not, because the law-abiding citizen should not have to ask permission and wait 1, 2, 3, 4 days, maybe even up to a week if there's a weekend involved. They should be able to take care of themselves. They're lawfully they should be able to be lawfully armed, not ask permission, and defend themselves immediately.
Agreed. I'm curious what NRA-ILA has to say. Can you bring us up to speed, Scott?
Certainly. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Senator Schultz. And as Michael said, many other senators, representatives who voted for this, the governor for signing it into law. It's fantastic now that Iowa has finally recognized the Second Amendment as a right and not a privilege. It's next Thursday on July 1st, as Michael mentioned. Iowa will become the 21st state to recognize this right to carry a firearm outside the home without having to jump through government, arbitrary government hoops and red tape. It's, Senator Schultz, you touched on some of the reasons to retain a concealed weapons permit, such as reciprocity. And I'll note that on NRA-ILA.org, there is a list of states that recognize Iowa's CWP to carry interstate. Another reason to obtain a CWP still is to satisfy the requirements of the Federal Gun-Free School Zones Act. And for those of you that are not familiar, in order to carry a concealed firearm within 1,000 feet of a school, you must have a permit issued by the state in which the school is in to carry. So that's another important reason to continue to get a CWP. I would like to note, and I know we'll get into this briefly, that law varies from state to state on the duty to inform a police officer when you're stopped, whether or not you're carrying a firearm. And it's important to remember that upon any interaction with a police officer, law enforcement, when you're pulled over or stopped, is to be respectful and remember that you are representing the entire gun owning community. So always remember to be respectful, be responsible with this right. And I think Richard and Michael, you wanted to get into what might be the best practices if you're stopped, pulled over, or encounter a law enforcement officer while you're carrying with a permit or without a permit.
Yeah, Richard, you want to walk us through what that looks like for you?
All right. There is no requirement in Iowa, as Scott said, it varies from state to state, but Iowa has no requirement, no duty to inform a police officer upon first contact that you're armed. However, let's assume the situation is a traffic stop I know some people here have talked about being stopped in traffic before. Some people have places to go. Maybe they don't pay as close attention to that speed limit sign as they should. So the trooper's out on the highway and pulls you over. He walks up, you know, you've either got it in your hand or you know where to get your driver's license and your insurance card ready. Maybe you get the hands on the wheel and the windows open, the car's shut off, and you look like a respectful citizen who's a little bit perturbed that he got caught for speeding, but you're a good guy. Although a police officer doesn't know that. So the question is, you don't have a duty to tell him you're armed, but you're lawfully armed at that time. What do you do about it? You may choose, a lot of people choose to, when you present your driver's license, your insurance card, also present your permit to carry if you have one. And up until July 1st, that's a requirement if you're driving around armed in your car. It won't be after that. So it's up to you whether you provide that permit or not, but a lot of people do, and that's maybe considered a best practice. So if you don't have it, if you're carrying constitutionally permitless, what would you do? Well, again, there's no duty to inform, but as the conversation unfolds, certainly if you were asked, do you have any weapons in the car? Grenades, rocket launchers, handguns?
Bazooka.
What are you going to say? No, that's none of your business, officer. No. If you're a good guy, you're not doing anything. Why not cooperate and say, yes, I'm lawfully armed, officer. And he may then ask, what do you have? Where do you have it? You know, on your body, in the car, whatever. Obviously, you don't want to make, and this is true when you're going for your driver's license in the glove box, don't be reaching for the glove box if that's where your pistol is without mentioning it. That's for sure. Not necessarily a good place to carry it, by the way.
Yeah.
But cooperate with the officer. I think that's the best practice. Be respectful, as Scott Jones said, and cooperate. He has no reason to suspect you. You're not doing anything illegal in this case. But really, there isn't a reason not to ask. Now, I'll have to say that this, in Iowa, this requires a change of mind, a paradigm shift, as it were, for people, our elected officials, and for law enforcement. Because before, if they came upon somebody who was armed or they suspected was armed, the way they verified they were a good guy is they checked to see if he had a permit. That's not required. It should not be required. And so now they don't have that, and they wonder, what are we going to do? But really, this has happened in other states. In Missouri, it was only a decade or so ago that they passed a permit to carry. However, it was legal before that to carry a loaded weapon in your car without a permit. Right. So officers making traffic stops were faced with this frequently, where they had a person who didn't have any permit, no way to prove he's a good guy, but he lawfully had a firearm in the car. In other states, Florida was that way, I think in Nebraska. So this isn't new ground that we're plowing here, but it's new in Iowa, and it requires both citizens and law enforcement to think about it a little differently, and it'll be a period of adjustment, I think.
Yeah. Well, again, not legal advice, but I've gotten into the habit of just handing my permit over with my copy of insurance, registration, and driver's license when I get, if I get pulled over. And the reason why is I've traveled through a number of states that actually do have a duty to inform. And when we're out there traveling, vacations, it's that season, people need to know and be thinking about that. A resource that you can use is handgunlaw.us. It's run independently. The gentleman there, I think he has a small team of folks. They do pretty well on reaching out to state organizations, states themselves, and trying to get accurate and updated information. So I would tell everybody that that's a pretty good resource to begin with. You're obviously going to be bound to the law in those individual states. You're going to need to seek that written word there. But as I said before, I typically just hand over a permit with a driver's license, because what I really don't want to do is be in a situation where I blurt out the window, you know, I've got a gun to an officer. And you also just I don't want to dwell on it too much, but I want you to put yourself in the perspective of an officer. He's pulled you over and he's sitting there for a minute running your tag, your plate, whatever else, and you're monkeying around the seat. You're doing all this stuff, trying to get that seat belt on because you're wearing it before, whatever. He doesn't know that.
No.
You might be stationing drugs or a syringe or a gun or whatever else. He doesn't know that. So help him out, you know, or her rather, and just stay calm, keep your hands on the wheel, and then go through the process of both the officer and you being courteous, and this usually works pretty well. So those are the things that I think about from time to time that I don't think that we take into consideration well. So there's some stuff that we wanted to cover. Again, not legal advice, but things to consider. So I did get out handgunlaw.us. Oh, one thing I wanted to touch on. I mentioned Bazooka earlier, and I'm going to let everybody in on the joke now. Okay, Senator Schultz. I was watching Senator Schultz on the floor. Was it this year?
No, it was a year, if not two ago.
Okay, and some crazy thing was mentioned by an opponent that inferred that we were all going to be walking around with bazookas on our backs as a result of this legislation, which is absolutely preposterous. However, I remember Senator Schultz basically saying something along the lines of, "I'd like to have a bazooka myself someday. It's one of my goals." But you know, and so every time something like this gets brought up, I instantly say bazooka. You know, and I'm sorry, I had to share it. And now everybody is part of the inside joke. So there you go.
It's a funny word. It's one of those funny words.
If someday you go down in history as Jason Bazooka Schultz, now we'll know why. So was there anything?
In my old age, I'll check my Wikipedia page and just see if somebody ever added that in.
There you go. I might do it today. So we touched on the fact that the law changed July 1, where we are able to carry on a permitless basis. Many people will probably retain permits for recognition in other states to be able to buy privately with ease. Oh, that was another one. Let me circle back to that. We've talked about some best practices, and regarding private sales, Iowa law is now in line with federal law. And what does that mean and not mean? Does Senator Schultz, you want to tackle that one real quick?
Well, so Iowa was in excess of federal law in controlling private sales of pistols and revolvers. What we did was match federal law now by removing the requirement for a state permit to acquire. So while we did that, we also changed the criminal penalty. The standard now in Iowa for private to private pistol or revolver sale is it is illegal to transfer if you knew or should have known that the other person is disqualified from receiving that firearm, the pistol or revolver. We also then changed the penalty from an aggravated misdemeanor, which is what it used to be under the permit system, the permit to acquire system, and raised that to a Class D felony. That's in line with federal law. So really what we did, I mean, you could say we lowered the standard for private transactions, but we also increased the criminal penalty if you knew or should have known. One of the criticisms in floor debate is that, well, nobody will ever meet that standard. There will be no criminal punishment for selling private firearms. Well, if both sides are law abiding, there should be no criminal charge. And secondly, if somebody misidentifies themselves, I mean, private to private, you do not have a commercial obligation to do a background check, and this isn't anything in life. I mean, we're trying to treat firearms as if they are just the household tool that they generally are. My own sidearm is not a family heirloom and special or anything. It's a tool that I use to protect myself and my family.
Yeah. So
we want to treat it that way.
Okay, so real quickly, for those of you wondering how that looks now, if let's say, Senator Schultz, that you and I make arrangements and I'm going to sell you a weapon privately or vice versa, and there's any concern whatsoever on breaking or one of us being disallowed or barred. Okay, so there are two easy ways to take care of this. You can ask if the person has a permit and get a copy of their driver's license so you can verify they're who they say they are, and here's a valid permit. They have dates of validity on them so you can see. Or federal firearms license, like dealers per se, have the background check and a 4473 form, which is what you fill out for the federal government. They have a section on there now that you can check for private transfer. So you can actually walk into an FFL dealer and say, I'm going to buy, Senator Schultz is going to sell. Can we run this transaction through you? I'm sure that there's a cost associated with that, but you can do that as well. So there are options out there that everybody can easily take care of to make sure that you're not, you're walking into an accident, because nobody that would ever watch this video, no law-abiding person would knowingly sell to somebody who is barred. And so if you want that extra level of protection, then you've got some options, and those are some. Go ahead, Richard.
Yes, I'd like to expand a little bit on this permit to the repeal of this requirement for a permit to acquire. As the senator pointed out, Iowa law was stricter in that regard than federal law. Federal law doesn't require that for private transfers of residents within the same state. You're not doing interstate. And it's the same thing with long guns. Well, Iowa law didn't require a permit from the state in order to privately transfer a long gun. It didn't, and it doesn't in the future. Partly because of that, I don't think that a lot of people understood that they had to have a permit to acquire pistols and revolvers for a private transaction, particularly if, your Aunt Edna, your Uncle Joe died, and Aunt Edna has an old 22 blinker pistol in the storeroom, and she wants to get rid of it, and she trades it or gives it to or sells it to a neighbor she's known forever or her nephew, and didn't know what the laws were, and just assumed it's a family thing. I can give it to my grandchild or my nephew and not a problem. And so I think a lot of people were committing a crime. And I think Senator would agree that the legislators do not wish to put into law things that are obscure, so people don't know about them, or they're confusing or ambiguous. And therefore, people who are otherwise law-abiding commit a paper crime. There's a word for that, and I can't remember what it is right now, but a Latin word. But they don't want to do that. And so by eliminating this permit to acquire, we've cleaned that off the board. But anecdotally, in my long experience, look at the gray hair, people that I've talked to that casually buy, sell, trade guns, always, unless it's a person they know well, a family member, they want to have a permit to carry or a permit to acquire, as evidence that they've had a background check, as evidence that they're a good guy. And so they'll still be able to do that. And I think most people will. But these casual transfers, particularly within families and among friends, those were crimes that were happening. Nothing bad was happening other than that there was a violation of the law. That's not going to happen anymore. And there's no reason that it should have been happening. So it's something to keep in mind.
All right. Thank you for that. So did we offer the public everything that they needed to consider with the changes July 1? Is there anything else that Richard, Scott, or Jason that you can think of that we need to touch on real quick?
I think we did a pretty good job of covering it. What I'd like to remind folks is that let NRA and IFC be a resource for you. If questions arise, if you're unsure of what this law changes, what it doesn't change, or if you'd like to see further changes next session, I'm sure Senator Schultz has gotten enough recommendations for changes to the law. However, we'd like to recommend a few more to him. So if you, again, have questions, want to see anything be changed, let NRA and IFC be a resource for you. There are ways to contact IFC on their webpage, ways to contact myself and NRA on our webpage. So, thanks for your membership, thanks for your support, and feel free to contact us anytime.
Having been deeply involved in this legislation and this section of the code for a long time, I do have a couple of other things, Michael. I'm sure you've read that. On this prohibited transfer of firearms, I want to point out that the law now specifically states that if you rent or loan a firearm to someone, a transfer doesn't have to be a sale. If you rent or loan somebody a firearm for lawful purposes, hunting, target shooting, whatever, if you do that to a person that you know or reasonably should know is prohibited, that too is a crime. And so I think we have a blog post going up that'll probably explain that. There is a new section of the law, because you don't have to show a permit now. If you're out on the street carrying openly or concealed, I recommend concealed for most purposes, but you're carrying and an officer, you have contact with an officer, you don't have to show a permit. You're lawfully armed, as we said earlier. However, what if an officer is called to the scene of a domestic disturbance or somebody out on the street corner causing a public disturbance, and they've gotten calls that there's a guy out here with a shotgun, and we don't know what he's going to do, but he's yelling and screaming, he's talking to himself, and he's not acting right. So the officer shows up. There's a new section of the law, and this was sought by law enforcement, and for good reason, and we worked through how to state this law. But it's called carrying of dangerous weapons. And remember, both the permit was a permit to carry weapons, not firearms, and the law now permits the carrying of weapons, not firearms. So carrying of dangerous weapons, duty to cooperate, reasonable suspicion. A person carrying a dangerous weapon whose behavior creates a reasonable suspicion that the person presents a danger to the person's self or others shall cooperate with an investigating officer. What that means is you don't have to show a permit, but if the officer is investigating a legitimate disturbance and he has reasonable belief to think that you might be a danger to yourself or other, then you need to cooperate. And what that really means is you need to identify yourself. You're going to need to identify yourself so that he can check your background or, your history. If you just were released from a mental institution on your own recognizance, you let yourself out at night. It's a duty to cooperate. It's not onerous. It only applies in certain circumstances, but it is a new section of the law. And so our people should know that, because people will say, well, how is the cop going to know who's a good guy and who's a bad guy? Well, if it's really a problem, they have a way. But because if you don't cooperate, it's a duty to cooperate. If you don't cooperate, I think it's a simple misdemeanor.
Okay, Senator Schultz, anything before we tap out?
No, just one of the, well, okay, yes. Can't say no and then give you one. The one item that I've heard even gun enthusiasts mention and pro firearms legislation supporters, the simple answer to their question, well, now people can carry until they do something wrong. Well, if the general idea of what we did is that if you couldn't successfully acquire a permit to carry, you can't carry without all of the same prohibiting factors, and that would be substance abuse, intoxication, previous history of criminal behavior. All we did, we gave freedom to the good guys. If you couldn't get a permit before, you can't just start carrying a gun now and suddenly have a loophole. But the folks that we're talking to in this video, you're more free. The responsibility is on your shoulders, which is what freedom is, and go ahead and be a free citizen. We're going to have no trouble with this. The laboratory of the states shows that states that have done this, and now there's 21 of them. We were number 19. We all got into this trying to be number 3, 4, 5, but we worked on it for 10 years. This is not a problem. This is a blessing on the citizenry and a problem for criminals, because there's more good guys armed out there.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that'll do it. Richard Rogers with IFC, thank you again. Scott Jones, NRA-ILA, thank you again. Senator Jason Bazooka Schultz, thank you again. If I say that enough times, it'll probably stick, just so you know.
I hope it does, because it was fun.
All right. Thank you, everybody. As Scott said earlier, use this as a resource. If there's something you're questioning or any regular questions, comments, or concerns, things that you think are wrong in the law, you should be reaching out. We've got lots of resources for that. I'll put them all. I'll install them all in the description so that everybody knows. Again, handgunlaw.us. Visit us at iowafc.org and ifcpac.org. That's our PAC. And oh, by the way, if you're interested in this law, you're welcome to go to ifcpac.org and look at the list of senators and House reps that voted for it, and those who said, I'm not interested in you having freedom. There's one parting thought that we didn't discuss, but I'd like for everybody here to consider. I've been giving a lot of thought to the Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow basically built the permit system because they were trying to keep people from owning. If you really think about it, in most terms, most of the gun control law that we see out there now is slavery by other means. I want you to really think about that, because that's truly what that is. It's the control of others, not because it affects you, because you want to take something from them that you don't think that they should have. And slavery and gun control are almost the same thing in that vein. So think about that. Let that rattle around a little bit because it's something that I don't think that we can get away from, and we need a right understanding of that. So again, thank you, everybody. July 1, everything goes into effect. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everybody. Thank you for watching the video, and thanks to you all for inviting me.